Welcome to the Community Living Education Project's Sharing Possibilities for Community Connections Learning event. The Community Living Education Project, also known as CLEP, is a program through Rutgers School of Public Health. CLEP is committed to providing individual guidance, mentoring, and education regarding community living resources for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities living in the state of New Jersey. The CLEP team, many who are family members themselves, can serve as a bridge for families whose loved ones may be seeking residential supports outside of the family's home. To ensure the highest sound quality possible, all attendees will be muted during today's event. To interact with the host and presenter, please use your Q&A option on your screen. Topic-specific questions will be addressed as long as time allows. For consideration to all of our attendees today, we encourage you to keep questions as general as possible. Just a reminder to look at your chat section on your screen. Links to resources such as today's PowerPoint will be posted in this section. Today's webinar, Can We All Just Get Along? Arranging Your Environment to Create Positive Interactions, is being presented by Ms. Delia Sequeira in collaboration with the Community Living Education Project and the New Jersey Division of Developmental Disabilities. At this time, I would like to welcome today's presenter, Delia. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melanie. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today on this third part of a 5-part series. Like Melanie said, this is Can We Just Get Along? Creating Positive Interactions. My name is Delia Sequeira. I'm a behavior analyst for the state of New Jersey. So let's get started. All right, so today's webinar objectives, we're going to be looking at a couple of ideas regarding how to create better interactions with the people we support. And really, if you look at the topics as we move along, you'll see that not only is it something that is beneficial for the interactions and relationships we create with the people we support, but also this can generalize to other people in your life and your environment. So hopefully this will be a very helpful presentation for everybody. All right, so today's objectives, we're going to look at how to avoid harmful interactions. We're going to look at positive interactions to help successful teaching. We're going to identify probably the strongest strategy for creating better interactions, which is staying close. And we're going to look at the idea of finding purpose in helping others. So a little bit about me. Like I said, I'm a behavior analyst for the state of New Jersey. My undergraduate work was completed in applied behavior analysis, as well as my graduate work. And a little bit more with my graduate work, not only did I do clinical applied behavior analysis, I also ventured into the world of organizational behavior management, which is the application of applied behavior analysis in business settings as well. So hopefully this allows you to see that this is a science that is applied in really any setting where humans are working, where they're living, where they're learning. Because what we're looking at is the science, the detailed science of learning. I have been a board certified behavior analyst since 2007 and have been in the field since around 2001. So it's been a while. I have currently been working for the state of New Jersey for the past 12 years. The first couple were as a consultant for the developmental centers. And now the last 7 years have been as a trainer, as a state employee for the Division of Developmental Disabilities. So a little bit about my work. Currently, my job with the Division of Developmental Disabilities is to offer workshops that are free of charge to provider agencies that are supporting people and providing behavioral support services. These workshops are geared usually towards direct support staff, and they focus on providing information about the basic principles of behavior analysis and how to develop better interactions. The remaining workshops that I offer through DDD, it's not the same as these are a collaboration with Rutgers CLEP, are a series that are offered towards anyone in managerial settings or above at the different provider agencies, and they focus on a little bit more in-depth topics regarding behavioral supports. These workshops range from anywhere from 2 to 3.5 hours. So as you can see, the workshops we're doing now with CLEP are tiny little versions of those little introductions, 45 minutes to an hour on each topic. The others that I offer through DDD are a little bit more involved. Additional workshops are provided by our resource team with some speech language pathologists that we have in our team, and they talk about topics regarding that area. So let's talk a little bit about what applied behavior analysis is. So applied behavior analysis, for those of you guys that are just joining us for this presentation, I apologize for those of you guys that have been here already. I'm doing a little bit of a repeat for every webinar. But applied behavior analysis is the application of the science of human behavior. The aim is to improve socially important behavior by creating interventions that are based on the principles of learning theory. And these interventions are usually evaluated repeatedly through different experiments using reliable and objective measures. So one of the workshops that we'll be talking about, I believe it's the next one, we're going to be talking about data collection. So that ties into the concept of measurement and the importance of data collection. So the science can be applied in many different areas, such as developmental disabilities, medicine, fitness, workplace, traumatic brain injury, you name it. If humans are behaving within the environment, we can absolutely take a look at any issues concerning that or any teaching possibilities. So what can ABA accomplish? Regarding appropriate behaviors, we really are looking at increasing appropriate and socially important behaviors and new skills to teach. So that should ideally help the person we're providing supports for. It helps to maintain behaviors that have been achieved and have been learned. And it helps to also generalize skill sets, not just to the particular environment where the behavior is taught, but also through other areas. So we're looking really at the concept of teaching, and you will see that throughout the presentations, whether you've sat through the two previous ones, either live or watched them via video, and the upcoming workshops that we'll be discussing as well. The concept that is really at the forefront of everything is teaching. So regarding inappropriate behaviors, we really look at the environment, we look at what's happening, we look at finding the root cause of the challenging behavior so that we can either restrict or narrow the conditions under which those behaviors occur by modifying the learning environment. And also we really look at focusing on teaching replacement skills that allow the person to access the outcomes that they were getting from the challenging behavior. Really, what we see with challenging behaviors is that it's skill deficits, right? The person has a skill deficit in that they were engaging in a challenging behavior to try to access a particular outcome or meet a particular need. And what we really want to focus on is reteaching, right? The socially acceptable version of that behavior to access that same outcome. Why ABA? Why teach? So we want to really focus on the people we're trying to support. We want to help them reach the highest level of independence that they can possibly achieve. And we really want to be aware of their abilities and capacities. One of my, I mentioned it in the last workshop, one of my biggest pet peeves is to hear somebody say, oh, that's just Joey. He's never going to change. He's never going to learn anything new. Well, guess what? Learning does occur at every stage, at every level. And so we really want to focus on what the person is able to do, what they're capable of doing, and maybe sometimes pushing a little bit more, right? Extending the person comfort level to learn something that's a little bit better for them, to help them improve the quality of life and increase noticeable signs of happiness. The next point is that we want to help the individuals we support to be integrated into the community with as little stigma as possible. And that should be a goal that we all have. The gentlemen and ladies that we support are part of the community. So we really want to focus on being educators, on being advocates, not just for them, but educators for those in the community that are witnesses to the interactions that are occurring, right? So if I go out with someone I'm helping to support to the community, I want others to be able to see how I interact in a positive manner with that person so that they can observe and learn from those interactions as well. That it's not someone that you should be afraid of or, you know, or be able to say, oh, I just don't understand what that is, because now you're seeing it. Now you're more aware. We also want to help each person we're trying to support reach their full potential. Again, learning, teaching is a concept here. And we want to try to provide the best services possible while also respecting the person's rights and wishes. All right. So let's dive into the workshop for today, which is starting or creating better relationships with others. And the main focus here is going to be to try to change our perspective, our focus towards appropriate behaviors that we're trying to teach while using positive consequences versus what people typically end up doing, which is focusing so much more on the challenging behaviors and using aversive outcomes. Why is it that challenging behaviors end up being the thing that people most focus on? Well, typically it's because it's a lot more energy consuming. If the challenging behavior is fairly intense, then there's going to be outcomes that are going to be very attention grabbing, essentially, for lack of a better term. But that's why we tend to focus so much more on those challenging behaviors, maybe the fear of them occurring, not wanting to handle them or manage them because it's just so tiring or so exhausting. So if we start to switch our perspective towards teaching, towards those normal times in the day or neutral times in the day, we want to be able to focus on that, to reinforce those moments, to strengthen the behaviors that are occurring there that are appropriate, to start to flip the balance, right? We want to flip the balance from the challenging behaviors to the appropriate behaviors. All right. So let's start with harmful interactions. How can we, as part of that relationship unit, how can we determine when we're having challenging or harmful interactions with others? Well, we got to start paying attention, right? This is where it starts. We have to start observing, paying attention to what is happening within the environment, how others are responding to you. So we want to look at and pay attention for interactions that drive others away from you, interaction strategies that involve ignoring other people, setting unreasonable expectations for interactions with others. We have to remember that the people that we're trying to support have some skill deficits. Otherwise, they wouldn't have the label developmental disability. So we want to really try and focus on being aware of what expectations they are capable of meeting and what they're not, and then focusing on how we can teach, right? One of the words that I hear often is regarding certain interactions is, oh, that was just so disrespectful. And my first question towards a staff person or a caregiver that says something regarding an interaction that they deem to be disrespectful is, what exactly does disrespect look like for you, right? That is just a label that is way too broad, that doesn't help me identify a behavior of interest. So if the caregiver or the staff person says, well, they didn't say please or thank you, then I can go back and say, okay, that makes more sense. What is it about saying please or thank you that makes it so important that you find it disrespectful? And where can we begin working with the individual to get to that place? If it's actually even important for them, there are some of the people we're trying to support that we're working with that maybe that's not so necessary, that we really want to focus on more important skills than saying please or thank you. If they're engaging in aggressive behaviors or self-injurious behaviors, we want to work on that first, right? So we really want to prioritize, want to work on identifying labels of behaviors to really describe them better so that we can start really having better observations, monitoring, so we can understand what we want to teach. The last point here is using coercives. And we're going to discuss what coercives are in a second because they're fairly common and they are a very easy fallback type of interaction that many of us can land on, essentially. So let's take a look at that. What are coercive interactions? So essentially, coercive interactions are trying to change a person's inappropriate behavior through aversive interactions. Coercion may cause the person that's on the receiving end to try to escape, avoid you, get even, right? With the person that's being coercive, if that's you or whoever else is being coercive towards them. And these negative interactions may also produce guilt, humiliation, fear, discomfort, and other negative feelings on the person that is on the receiving end of those coercive interactions. So we really want to focus on how we are responding to others, how we are interacting with others, and how they respond to us. So let's take a look at the most common coercive interactions. So we have questioning, arguing, sarcasm, verbal force, threats, empty promises, criticism, despair. So let's go into each one of these just briefly so that I can explain a little bit more about why these interactions or these types of interactions are coercive. So, first, with questioning, what I always say about questioning is that typically questioning leads nowhere good for the person on the receiving end of the questions, right? So, say Mary takes Stacy's iPad, right? Without telling her, just yanks it away. And a staff person is watching and they say, Mary, why'd you do that? You're not supposed to do that. Why'd you do that? Well, if Mary can respond, she may respond in different ways, either defensively or in a I don't care manner, right? So I didn't do it. She made me. Or, yeah, I took it and what, right? So if Mary could respond, there's other times that we're going to be working with people that cannot communicate in that manner. And so questioning is still not going to be effective there. And typically, for most people, questioning leads to outcomes that are not necessarily pleasant. So it leads to give her that back, right? Or let me take that from you. Or, if they're in a home with a parent, go to your room. So it always leads to kind of an aversive world. It doesn't help. So the idea behind how we can be better at this is looking at the behavior, why it's happening, figuring out the reason, so that then we can prevent the behavior from happening altogether through teaching, right? So if we know Mary really likes the iPad, say it's a shared iPad between two housemates, well, then we can set up schedules or we can teach Mary how to request it appropriately. Can I have the iPad? Can I use the iPad? Or if she can't communicate, either sign pictures, right? Or having staff follow a schedule to prevent any issues with iPad use. There's different ways that we can identify the why of the behavior to teach an appropriate replacement so that when it comes time to interact with the people we're supporting, we do it in a much more positive manner, in a teaching manner. Arguing, I always say, gets everybody nowhere really fast. And so arguing is problematic for a multitude of reasons. One, it typically doesn't solve anything. It actually ends up escalating situations. And we also have to see the reason why it escalates. We have to start thinking about the idea of how these events, how these interactions affect us from a physiological, biological perspective. So, what happens to most of us when we argue with someone? Well, if you look at, say, a heart rate monitor, right? As you start to argue with someone, maybe you're getting a little bit upset. Adrenaline is starting to flow a little bit faster. Your heart rate increases, your breathing rate increases. It's a lot more difficult to kind of neutralize the moment because you're already getting physically worked up. So, excuse me, if you are feeling that way, you can only imagine that the person on the receiving end of arguing is probably experiencing the same thing. So it's better to not argue. It's better to not have those really challenging interactions because it will deteriorate the relationship over time. With sarcasm, I always say sarcasm is a very difficult concept for many people to get, not just individuals with developmental disabilities. Everybody's version of sarcasm is a little different and it's confusing because what you're doing is saying one thing when you actually mean the opposite. And if you think about that idea and that many people may not capture it, what they're hearing is not necessarily what you're intending to say. So I always say speak clearly, be concrete with how you speak, with very little to no sarcasm. That doesn't mean that you can't use it on certain occasions, especially if the individual you're trying to support can understand it and may actually participate in using sarcasm in maybe a humorous manner. But I would say for trying to change behavior, it's not a good idea, right? So an example is, say I go out to the community to a store with one of the young men I'm helping to support, and they start having a little bit of an issue regarding an item that they want, and they start engaging in some problematic behaviors, screaming, saying, "I want to take this home." And imagine that I look at them and I say, "Buddy, bravo, bravo, that's the best behavior I've seen out of you all day," right? If that person does not comprehend sarcasm, what are they hearing from me? They're hearing that they're doing great, that this is a good thing. Even if they end up not getting the item that they want because we end up going home without it, but they're still hearing that from me. And that can be problematic. So you want to try to reword how you say things so that sarcasm is removed from the equation. Verbal force is kind of that raising your voice. That's problematic because it leans back again on that biological, physiological problem, where if you start raising your voice, that also means that internally things are happening that can get you more worked up. And the person on the receiving end is probably feeling those exact same events. And what does adrenaline do? When you think about what adrenaline does for you, we call it the fight or flight hormone, right? So in some cases, they're going to fight. Some cases, they're going to fly. They're going to back away. They're going to try to escape, right? Avoid. And in some cases, they're going to try to fight, get even. So we really want to try to avoid that for both parties. It really isn't necessary to try to change behavior using these kinds of coercive interactions. Threats, I think, are horrible, and that's my personal opinion. But threats, what do threats do? They really just kind of open up the window to the next step, which is really aversive or punitive events, right? You never really threaten something good. So using threats is really problematic, not only because it kind of leads into the world of punitives or punishment, it also teaches the person a lot about you. If you follow through with the threats and use punishments, that teaches them that you're aversive and that you're not someone that is a good person to have a relationship with. And so they may fear you, they may try to escape, avoid you. But also, if you don't follow through with threats, that also teaches them that you're not consistent. So, really trying to avoid the use of threats is much more beneficial when you're trying to have an interaction with someone or a relationship, a teaching relationship, especially. Empty promises kind of live in a similar world as threats. When you promise something and you don't follow through, that teaches the person that you're not a consistent source of support, and that can be problematic. With criticism, even that funny word that a lot of people use, constructive criticism, if you think about it, that can be problematic because most criticism involves telling someone that what they're doing is not correct or not good. And if you're on the receiving end of that, when you're learning something, some people may just say, fine, I don't want to do it anymore, right? If there's no reinforcement happening, that can be an issue for the person. So we really want to avoid criticism and kind of focus on what I call teaching language, supportive teaching language. So say you're working with someone to learn a new skill. What could be a skill I could tell you guys? Uh, okay, let's do one because I'm in my bedroom. I have a little corner in my office in my in that I call my office in my bedroom, but I have my bed right next to me. Say you're working with someone to teach them how to put the fitted sheet on a bed. Well, that's a really tough skill, even for someone like me, right? You have to run around in all the corners, grabbing, making sure that nothing snaps back on you. And say you've been working with someone really hard to teach them how to make their own bed, and they're still struggling a little bit, right? You let them try it on their own for the first time, and when you come into the bedroom to see the outcome, it looks a little rough, right? Like two corners are okay, the other two are not so great. Well, what would teaching language look like versus criticism? Here's criticism. Oh, buddy, that's not how I taught you to do that. Those two corners look terrible. See the focus on the not so great part of the task, versus teaching language, which would look like, oh my goodness, you did so great putting those two corners down. Do you need help with the other two that kind of went off, right? Or do you want us to try it together? Do you want me to show you how to do one and you can try the last one on your own? So see the difference between criticism and teaching language. One provides reinforcement for what has been completed already, and it helps the person continue on the learning path. The other provides essentially what's a verbal punisher for the task that wasn't completed so great. And it actually may get the person to not want to continue to learn, right? So we really want to focus on language, avoid criticism. Lastly, despair. Despair is just something that we as the person providing support can sometimes feel when we're just kind of out of energy, out of patience, out of tolerance, and we just want to give up. But if we verbalize that to the person that we're supporting and having an interaction with, saying something like, oh, fine, I just don't care anymore, or I have no time for this, what is that person picking up from you? That they're not important enough for you to provide support, or that you're not a consistent source of support. So we really want to change that despair. When I'm helping direct support staff go through this presentation, I say, this is the best time to ask for assistance, help from a teammate or a colleague, right? Help you tap out, tap in, just to take a little breather and come back when you're a little bit more energized, take a 5-minute break. When you are on your own working with someone, this is when you say, I got to have a little bit more patience. I got to have a little bit more tolerance, because this can get better. If I am patient, if I am tolerant, if I help the person, this will help the person out, and it will help me out in the end, because it'll make the event or the situation better over time. So it's just about thinking about kind of that long game, right? I always say that initially, when you're trying to change a behavior or teach something new, it's going to take a lot of energy, a lot of effort at the front end. And as the behavior starts to improve, or as the skill is learned, it becomes a little less difficult, a little less energy uh, um, that you have to put in, so that it could be more easy for us. Okay, so let's look at when we're more likely to be coercive. When we are tired, when we're hungry, when we're uncomfortable, when we've had a bad day. Look at all the things that are landing on us, right? As the other person in that interaction. When we're not experiencing good outcomes, that can also have an effect on us. So think about that. That actually makes a lot of sense, because if you are being coercive towards someone else, they're feeling these exact same things. So we really want to focus on that, having more patience, more tolerance, being more positive, focusing on the appropriate behaviors through positive interactions. So there's my little list of when we're more likely to be coercive. So really, I also call this the kind of like the mirror presentation, because it's really trying to put a mirror in front of us as one half of the interaction, to really attend to how we interact with others and really pay attention to how others respond to us. Okay, how do we avoid using coercives? I pretty much just gave you that. It's really all about noticing the interactions and finding a better way to do so in the future. All right, another thing that we want to take a look at, this is post coercives, but we really want to look at the concept of blaming, right? Blaming is problematic. So blaming someone for the behaviors that they're engaging in is problematic. If you sat through the last workshop that we did together, that I did with CLEP, we talked a little bit about behavior and some behavior principles. And hopefully one of the bigger points that came out of that is that all behavior has a purpose. There is a reason for why behavior occurs. And so if we blame someone for the behaviors they're engaging in, we're kind of missing the point. We're kind of not looking at the reason why the behavior is occurring. There is a purpose to it. We're starting to then blame the person. So because all behavior serves a purpose, we really actually want to get to the root cause of the challenging behavior, help to change it, and still be able to see the person in a positive way, in a positive light, to make it so that you have better interactions. So I say that it's unreasonable to become frustrated and hold people to blame for things that they think, feel, and do, because again, all behavior has a reason for occurring. And if your interactions are positive and reinforcing, that increases the likelihood of better future interactions. And so we want to consider that we have a big part in this. All right. Okay. Another thing that we want to take a look at is sensitivity. Um, you may have heard the term sensitivity training, maybe in the workforce, but also for us, sensitivity matters. So let's take a look at some examples of reasons why we want to be sensitive and want to be considerate of the people we're trying to support. They have very uh, many reasons why they have the label that they do. And in addition to the label of developmental disabilities, they have other concurring variables that are happening to them at the same time. So we really want to identify what those are, see how those affect behavior, and really be sensitive to these events, right? So the first one is growing up with developmental disabilities is not easy. So I'm not saying that our lives are not easy, but think about someone that has a developmental disability and how much more their life and world revolves around supports, around many other people, maybe not having as much independence, maybe not knowing how to do certain things. So there's so much that comes together when you have developmental disabilities that makes your life just a little bit harder, whether you are able to recognize that or not. So life can be challenging. We have to remember that for when we have interactions with someone with developmental disabilities. In addition to the developmental disability label, health issues. So many of the gentlemen and ladies we support have health issues tied into that, and we want to be considerate of those events so that we can understand the person better and why they're engaging in the behaviors they're engaging in. Also think about brain impairment. This is a big issue because, again, the developmental disability label usually comes with this concern as well. And so brain impairments may make it more or less likely for someone to engage in different types of behaviors, whether they're challenging or not. And knowing that can help you see the bigger picture of how to help the person do better, how to help them succeed. And lastly, let's take a look at this example because it's one that we unfortunately haven't been able to avoid, although we're trying our best to help people not experience this, but abuse. Abuse can absolutely change the way someone engages in behavior, both abuse experienced in childhood and in the adult years. We want to really increase the sensitivity to someone that has experienced abuse in their learning history in their past, because it will have an effect on how they respond to their environment. If we learn about that, if we become aware that someone has experienced abuse, then we can modify how we interact with them, how we do things to not say kind of bring them back into trauma, or to help them have a better relationship with their current people supporting them or their environment. So we really want to look at that as well as part of having more sensitivity. So let's talk about the relationships. Reciprocity in a relationship, meaning the mutual relationship, right? The back and forth between a relationship. So having a mutually reinforcing relationship involves an ongoing reinforce reciprocal interaction. So my interactions with the person I'm trying to support have to be reinforcing, and their interactions with me have to be reinforcing in order for the relationship to build a solid foundation. And one of those people has to typically initiate that interaction. That's typically us, the ones that are providing support. Can it be the person that we're supporting? Absolutely. But if you know and are familiar with the different levels of cognitive functioning, the different types of disabilities, that may be a difficult thing to try to get someone else to do. So it really starts with us to kind of work through the process of creating a more positive interaction. We want to pay attention to how the other person responds. And I know I keep on saying that, but it's truly important. We want to create mutually reinforcing relationships that can ease the responses of the person as well that's being supported during difficult times. So when you start to build the foundation of a really good relationship, that can help and generalize through other events. Um, some examples that I've heard before in the past is, say a young woman at a group home has a great, strong, solid relationship with the group home manager. Well, when she has a difficult moment, sometimes the group home manager can easily come in and say, hey, what's going on? Talk to me. Instead of engaging in XYZ behavior, talk to me. And it may be very likely that that young woman kind of neutralizes, calms down a little bit, takes a breather, and begins to communicate with that person. Why? Because they've had the time to build a solid, positive relationship between the two of them, right? The group home manager showing interest in her world is reinforcing. The young woman then reciprocates by having a good, solid, positive interaction and relationship with the group home manager. So we want to look at how that's done and how we can create that. Also, establishing a relationship that both of you are interested in having. When there is disinterest, that kind of lands into that world of coercives a little bit, right? Into that the sort of despair, criticism. Oh, I have no time for you. Oh, I have no patience for you. And so, if you're not interested in having a relationship with the person you're trying to support, that alone will kind of stop the process from occurring, right? So, as a brief, tiny example, when I worked at one of the developmental centers, there was an older lady that I used to see every time I would go to the cottage I was assigned to see all my cases and review things and spend time with the ladies in that cottage and talk to the staff. But every time she saw me walking in, I guess maybe because I said hello to her, she would take my hand and show me all the colors in her shirt, right? And she would point to the different colors in the flowers or buttons and show me that. And I thought, ah, she's showing me the colors. That's really sweet. We don't know why, but then I observed, right? Remember observing reading matters here. I was observing that she was sitting at a table with some markers and some colors and some paper. And I thought, you know what? I have an extra 5 minutes. I can sit with her for a little bit. I love to color. Yes, I love to color, right? So at home here in my apartment, I have a whole armoire full of arts supplies because I love to do that. Actually, if you guys see those little paintings back there, I did those. They're not that great, but I did them for my room. So notice, I like to do that, right? So I actually took the time to sit with her and I asked her if I can have a paper. She just slid it over in my direction. And I asked her if I could have a marker and she gave me one. And I started to color with her. Not We weren't really even doing that much talking. She didn't really talk that much, but I was sitting with her, interested in her activity, and she noticed that. So guess what ended up happening? Over time, whenever I walked into that cottage, she would take my hand, she would hear me, come find me, take my hand and have her she would direct me to her little table area with colors because she wanted me to sit down and color with her. And I would take the time. What was 5 to 10 minutes of my day at that moment to sit down with her and do that? And I would do something quick, show it to her and say, I'm done, ta-da, and I would give it to her and she would take it and that was it. And then we would move on. But guess what? That was 5, 10 minutes. That was like high quality, really reinforcing event so that whenever she saw me, she smiled, she waved, she tried to take me to her table. And we would just have this fun relationship that I would actually look forward to. It was like, oh, I'm going to go color for 5 minutes. Great, let's do this, right? Um, and that just made things a little bit better for her, not for her for her day, but for me too. Like, how much fun was that to have a little coloring break during a long day at work? So these are the things you can do. These are the things that help to create better relationships with others. So we want to establish and maintain these mutually reinforcing relationships. So again, I cannot stress this enough. Pay attention to the environment, and the environment means everything that surrounds us, everything that's within us. That means people, places, things, events that are occurring internally. We want to attend to all these things. We want to learn how to communicate with others in different ways. not everyone communicates in the same manner. So we really have to take responsibility for how we communicate with others. If you are working with someone who, as a child, through their entire childhood and in the childhood system, they use sign language, well, guess what? Now that they're an adult and they're in the adult system of services, somebody that signs needs to provide supports for them. Somebody, and if you are providing supports and you don't know sign, it's your responsibility to learn a little bit of sign language, even if it's basic communication to help that person. So we really want to look at communicating in different ways. There was an older woman that I used to help to support, and she spoke kind of what I called a trifecta. She spoke English, she spoke Spanish, and she spoke a weird little combination of both that was a little beyond my skills in Spanglish because there was some mumbling involved, some bad words. Just when she would get really upset, that's where she would get to that kind of mixed bag of words. But when staff couldn't communicate with her well, they would call me and say, hey, can you come and talk to her in Spanish? Because we're having a hard time with English. And I would go talk to her in Spanish. And because I speak English, Spanish, I understood maybe 30% of the mixed bag that she would throw out when she was really upset. But speaking to her in Spanish helped so much because she would express all her anger, express all the things that were happening to her and why she was so mad. And then I would offer solutions and help her kind of say, okay, what can we do about that? Let's talk to someone, right? Or let's get you that thing you want. Or let's, one of the things that was a big deal for her is her soap operas in Spanish. And if the staff changed the TV for someone else to watch another program, she would get really upset. So we ended up being able to fight for her to like have her time. And I was actually fighting for her to have her own TV to like really have her own free time with her soap operas. But she was able to access them and was a much happier older lady watching her soap operas in Spanish. So you have to think about all these things. And guess what? Just doing that for her, whenever she saw me, she attended to me if I spoke to her because we were building that relationship. So we want to learn about the person's interests, their culture, their background. These are all things that can help, right? We want to share some of ourselves through genuine, wise self-disclosure, right? Something as simple as me interacting with with the older lady that liked to color. I was showing her that I was really genuinely interested in coloring, and she could pick up on that because no matter the level of cognitive functioning, people can still kind of pick up on those feelings, the events, what's going on, and kind of gather clues about the interaction through that. Um, okay, so what kind of interactions do we want to have? Appropriate interactions, right? Something as simple as great work, thanks for helping me, you look good today, the room looks super. We want to really avoid inappropriate interactions such as stop that. I said no, you know better than that. Don't let me see you do that again. Go sit down and be quiet. Here's the problem with the no's. The no's are very decisive on our end, but they're usually not so decisive on the end of the person that they are experiencing those no's, right? If you say, stop that, right? And you're already a little worked up and the person doesn't, where does that lead you? That leads you to potentially get more upset, potentially engage in coercives, and even something as bad as like using punishers to try to get the person to stop. Now, if the person is engaging in a challenging behavior, what we can do is say, hey, why don't you come with me? Why don't we look at something else, right? We talk about this word redirection. What does redirection look like? Offering choices, de-escalating, really opening up the door slowly to shape up more appropriate responses rather than no, stop, which can actually lead us as the person giving out those interactions that are aversive to end up in a more difficult place if the person doesn't stop, right? If you're using appropriate interactions, even through a challenging moment, you can sort of shape the person a little bit out of the crisis or the difficult moment. So we really want to look at these things. Okay, So what are some types of reinforcing consequences we can use? Social interaction, right? Something as simple as me coloring with the lady, verbal praise, tangible items, appropriate activities, and never forget breaks from tasks or work are also potential reinforcers that we can use. When do we want to use reinforcement? Well, after we see behavior that we really like, an appropriate behavior, and if you want to see it more often, use it, right? Provide that strengthening outcome to maintain behavior. If you're having a difficult moment with these words, with these concepts, take a look at the workshop from last week that we did where I discussed the basic principles. We talked a little bit about this, and hopefully that'll help out to understand a little bit what I'm discussing here. All right, so what are the advantages of using praise and feedback to improve interactions? Well, praise and feedback are always available and cost nothing to provide, right? So you're doing great, you look wonderful, you made your bed and it looks super, you took a shower, you smell good, yeah, you're looking great, right? All these things that we could do are all free. People rarely get tired of being praised, right? Praise and feedback can be provided without interrupting an ongoing activity, so that's also very beneficial. And so we also want to look at a couple of things regarding positive behavior in the environment. The environment absolutely affects positive behavior. It affects the person's daily enjoyment. It affects their ability to learn and use important skills. The environment also affects whether challenging behavior or problem behavior will occur. And so one of the things that we want to look at is what's available in the environment. So we want to make sure that the environment has choices, it's suited to the person's needs, preferred items and events are available, and opportunities for appropriate in social interactions exist as well. There has been research that's been done that when an environment is bleak, it can create challenging moments, it can create challenging behavior, and it absolutely diminishes the ability of someone's learning. And so we really want to ensure that we're looking at enriched, vibrant environments that offer all these possibilities for people when we're trying to support them. Okay, so let's talk about probably the easiest and best strategy to use in order to achieve success regarding positive interactions and better uh, environments and whatnot. And that's staying close. And it means staying close, kind of in a physical manner, staying close, right? What happens when I am relatively physically close to someone that I can see them, that I'm sitting close by, right? I can interact with them much faster when good things are happening. I can also intervene and try to de-escalate much quicker when behaviors start to go bad, right? When challenging behaviors start to occur or a crisis starts to bubble up. So what can we do when we stay close? We create a safe, positive environment by establishing ourselves as a source of caring, empathy, and positive consequences. The closer you are to the person you're supporting, the greater assistance you can provide them. Now, I don't mean being so close to them that you're attached at the hip, right? That's not what I mean. I mean, unless the person has a, say a one-to-one support staff that has to be within arm's length, that's a different kind of close, right? But I mean close just in general, being able to observe, see the person, right? Sit nearby, be attentive to what's going on, even while you're doing your own work, that you can still pick up on what's happening in the room quickly because you're close. Those things matter. Staying close means that you're showing that you care, that you're being attentive, that you're listening, that you're talking, and that you're being near. Now, we also work with individuals that have absolute individual time, that they can leave the area, that they can do that. That's fine. I don't mean stick close to them every single moment of the day, but close when it's appropriate, right? So say it's dinner time, everybody's kind of prepping at the group home, you're close, you're nearby, you're attentive. If somebody's watching TV and you can bring your paperwork with you and sit in the living room, do some of the appropriate work there, maybe some of the stuff that requires privacy information you don't want to do there. But kind of figure out a time best place to just be near, right? The benefits of staying close. You will build the foundation for a good relationship. You will learn about the person, such as their interests, what they value, what they like to do, what they don't like to do. Your input will become more important to that person because you start to become important to them, become part of the environment, and improved communication skills for both parties. Um, Even with someone that doesn't communicate verbally, even with someone that functions at a very, very low cognitive level, if you are close, you can still pick up on the cues that tell you what's happening with them, right? I worked many years ago with someone that was in a wheelchair, functioned at a very, very low cognitive level. I believe his documentation was in the realm of months. That's where his developmental age was at, and he was chronologically in his mid 30s. But I noticed that when he was kind of upset at anything, I didn't know exactly what, he would kind of crouch down and start mouthing his hand. But if he was a little bit more content with the world, and I was making an assumption based on the cues I was picking up from him, he was up, he was looking around and like, bobbing his head a little bit to the music if there was music playing in the cottage. So you pick up on these cues. And how did I do that? By being near. Had I been far away, not attending to him, there's no way I would have been able to pick up on that information. So this actually works. So how do we stay close? Be near, use appropriate tone of voice, relaxed body language and posture, listen, pay attention to when the person communicates with you, stay cool throughout the process, so no coercives. It doesn't mean reprimanding, lecturing, moralizing, or being judgmental. That lands you in the land of coercives, right? That's in that world of criticism. So we want to stay away from that. When you try to merge reinforcement and a coercive, it destroys the reinforcer, right? The thing that stays behind is just the coercive. And I'm certain that many of you can relate to that phrase, you're doing great, but, right? The but kind of negates everything that's said before that. And what we end up remembering is typically everything after that pause, right? After that but. Um, so we want to attend to that. Um, with the appropriate tone of voice. I always, when I write behavior support plans, when I go in and train anywhere, I talk about how important this is because I have an understanding of how even tone of voice can affect someone's behavior. If I'm talking to you guys, right, through this workshop, and I'm like, oh, and yeah, you have to be close. Yeah, that matters, I mean, I'm telling you the right information. Staying close matters. But look at my tone of voice, my body posture, my whole way of expressing myself. It really negated everything I was saying. How am I talking to you guys? With like a positive tone of voice, enthusiastic, right? My body language may not be so relaxed because I'm kind of a little bit animated. The coffee kicked in a little. Um, but notice that difference, it has an absolute effect on someone, right? If you're a staff person that's talking like very in a very disinterested manner to someone, they're gonna pay attention to that, even if they don't fully understand what you're saying. Just that, yeah, okay, whatever matters, right? Somebody picks up on that as being dismissive, as someone that doesn't care, doesn't want to interact, doesn't want to waste their time with you. So we want to be really careful when we're interacting with others, especially with that tone of voice, body language piece. What are the best times to teach? Let's dive a little bit into the teaching concept because all of this builds in to that entire concept of teaching. So we look at teaching as very important for what we want to do, which is building better interactions, improving behavior, improving the environment, quality of life. And so the best times to teach are really any time that crisis is not happening, right? What I call neutral times. Especially if a person is asking for help to complete a task, if you're attentive to what they can do, their abilities and their capacities, that might be a good time to teach. If a caregiver is completing a task for a person that they may be able to learn, that may be a good time to teach. In situations where the person has had challenging behaviors or problem behaviors in the past, that may be a good opportunity to teach, like how to do better. So we want to focus on these possibilities of teaching. And we always, always, always want to consider the person's abilities and capacities before we look at any teaching plan, because we want to ensure that we're on the right path to what we can teach them, how we can teach them, and really looking at the reasons why the challenging behaviors occur or skill deficits are happening so that we can really create an individualized teaching plan for the person. So let's look at the steps of using positive reinforcement, because this is critical to teaching. You want to strengthen the new skills. So positive reinforcement is what's going to do that for you. So we want to provide the appropriate consequence, meaning it's function-based. And last week we talked about, 2 weeks ago, we talked about function in the basic principles of ABA workshop. We want to tell the person what they liked. This is your praise, right? This is your opportunity to use pointed praise. If it's appropriate, let them know what you liked. Provide a consequence that matches the value of the behavior. So the effort that it took to engage in the appropriate behavior kind of match the value of the outcome for them. Provide the outcome within 3 seconds of recognizing the appropriate behavior. Now, that's pretty quick, right? Believe it or not, in research, it's actually listed that it should be a lot faster than that, but most of us can't do it that quickly. So my rule of thumb is 3 seconds. How can we provide reinforcement within that time frame? Guess what? By staying close, right? Even if we throw out a quick reinforcer. So say someone that I'm working with signs drink, right? For the first time on their own. We've been working on signing drink to access something to drink. So give me 1 second. It reminded me I needed to take a sip. So they sign drink. And if I'm nearby, I see them sign drink and I say, great job, you signed drink. Let me get you some water, or let me get you preferred drink that we've been using to teach the sign, right? I can do that quickly because I'm near. What if that person signs drink and no one's nearby to see them? They don't get their drink, and the sign itself isn't reinforced to be continued to use. So they may stay thirsty for a while. And because the sign is not being strengthened through the outcome, that sign may weaken, or it may take longer for them to establish that sign as a behavior that they engage in to continue to use. So we want to use sincere, appropriate facial expressions, tone of voice, body language. Really try to avoid those coercives and punishers. They don't work over time, not long term. So we really want to focus on the idea of reinforcing appropriate behaviors. We want to make sure that the consequences that we're using are actually reinforcing to the person. It has to matter to them in order for those outcomes to have an effect on appropriate behaviors. For us, the last part of this presentation, the last couple of slides are really for us as the providers of support. First and foremost, bounce off the upsets. If you are in a situation where the person you're supporting has made you really upset, guess what? Try to bounce it off. Look at the behavior, not the person. The behavior that they're engaging in has a purpose, has a reason. And so if we can determine what that purpose is, what that reason is, we can work around teaching new skills. We can work on changing the environment a little bit to have that behavior not occur. And then we can really look at the focus of teaching. If we can bounce off the upsets and not get mad at the person, we become better teachers. We become better providers of support for them. Not only that, the people that cannot bounce the upsets, or that end up getting upset and start kind of building that in, can cause way more harm to the people we're trying to support than those of us that can bounce off the upsets. So what is the purpose? In the references, you'll see a great book called Getting Ready to Help. If you have the opportunity to read it, it's about this thin and not that expensive on Amazon, but it's a great little book about providing support. And one of the things that I took away from this book was this acronym, which I absolutely love. It's super simple to remember, PEARL. But PEARL is your purpose. in this world of providing supports for individuals with disabilities. And it's be positive, intervene early when difficulties arise with all people all the time in a reinforcing manner while looking for opportunities to teach and support. It's super simple, but man, does it encapsulate every little thing that we need to do as providers of support for someone. And it really doesn't matter what title you have, whether you're a parent, whether you're a caregiver, a guardian, direct support, behavior analyst, psychologist, social worker, doesn't matter. If you have contact and you interact with the person we're trying to support, this is your purpose. At least the primary main focus, this is what that is. And lastly, experience the joy, right? It is often apparent that in some helping situations, some people do not find the joy in it and they're not joyful, they're not having fun. These people that are not experiencing the joy in helping are the ones that are more prone to treating others poorly, promoting dependence, expecting compliance, frowning on change, inciting behavior problems. Oh, that one's really problematic. I worked with someone that used to, on purpose, get a lady that I worked with riled up and get her mad just because he thought it was funny. That's not okay. Was um, he was reprimanded for it. He was written up for it several times, but they never found any bad enough to fire him, and that drove me bananas because I'm watching someone that's inciting behavior problems, and that was not okay. He totally missed the point of how to establish a mutually reinforcing relationship. Whenever that lady saw this staff person, she would try to run away from him because he was that problematic. And you could see that kind of relationship, how predictable it is based on everything we've been talking about, right? He was problematic and she tried to escape because he was that problematic. And so what we want to do is we really want to try to experience the joy, for us to become joyful when we have these experiences, even through crisis. In my world of my learning history, of my many years of a behavior analyst, even my most intense crisis moments, I can look back on and say, oh my goodness, that was crazy, but it was so rewarding to work through it, right? Even in my most difficult times with a client that I'm helping, I'm trying to see the positive. I'm trying to see how I can help the person de-escalate, teach. And that really has an effect on how I look back on those interactions and how I see that person. It really helps me experience the joy in what I do. And therefore, it allows me to continue doing what I do because I like it, because I love it. Something as simple as training, even though I can't see any of you guys, I love doing this because I love sharing this information with others. All right, so my final thoughts. Creating positive interactions will require a change in our focus as well. That may take some time, but the changes can occur. And goodness gracious, they are so worth it in the end, guys. So take all this information, put it together, see how you interact with others. And if you see an issue, really put in the effort to try to change how you do that, because it will be beneficial not just for the person that you're helping to support, but for you in the end. It will also be beneficial. So we are done with this workshop. Let me get through a couple of slides that are important to get to, where I want to bring up the webinar series. Part 1 and part 2 we've already completed. Today is part 3. Part 1 and part 2 are available via YouTube, and they have links through CLEP for these videos if you want to go back and see me talk about these other things. Also, the PowerPoint presentations are available in PDF form as well. The upcoming webinars, part 4 and part 5, we're going to be talking about the importance of behavior assessments and behavior support plans. And part 5, we're going to be talking about data and why it's so critical. So if you're interested in learning more about this, please continue to visit us during these webinars, register for them, because I'm going to be providing a lot of basic information for these topics. And that's it for me. Thank you, everybody. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me at my email address, and I'll leave this page up. And Melanie, I send this back to you.
Delia, thank you so much, as always, for sharing your afternoon with us. So we have quite a few questions coming in. I'm not
Okay.
sure if your schedule would your schedule allow you another 5-10 minutes?
Oh, absolutely.
Perfect. So let's do it.
Okay.
So let's just get to, let's say, 2 or 3 of these questions.
Mhm.
And just so everyone knows, sometimes, right, Delia is going to have to ask, 10, 20 questions in order to give you a reply. If this is one of these questions, Delia, can someone reach out to you directly for some
Absolutely.
resources?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, first question is, we have someone reaching out. They're reaching out to ask for some suggestions to provide a group home manager on how to appropriately respond to a certain situation. At this time, there is a staff member who feels that there's an individual in this home, and in her eyes, she really feels that the DSPs are talking about her, or possibly even out to get her.
Mhm.
She sees the manager as the mother or the boss, and
Mhm.
she's the only one that the resident wants to talk to and really
Mhm.
craves her attention. The resident will get upset if she doesn't receive the manager's attention and can become verbally or physically aggressive.
Right.
Any suggestions on how to, I guess, better include that DSPs into that positive relationship?
So my suggestion would for that would be something like pairing. So really kind of bringing in that other DSP. Well, first and foremost, ensuring that the DSPs are really not talking about the woman behind her back or in front of her. You really want to make sure that that's actually not happening. But if that's not happening, bring in the DSP and pair with them. So whenever this woman needs assistance or uh, needs to ask for something, kind of bring in that DSP with you as the manager and say, you know what, this is what you can do. Tell the DSP this is what you can do. Have the woman be there and kind of say she can help you. I give her permission to help you in this. So you want to pair the person, the DSP, to that group home manager to really kind of demonstrate the ability to support her as well in a positive way, if that makes sense. I know that my answers are going to be very difficult to sort of apply perfectly to your situation because I'm not there to be able to see it. But I would say pairing um, is really helpful when it comes to that. Trying to get that DSP to be seen in a similar light as the group home manager through that connection between the two of them, that pairing that occurs.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And Delia, we've spoken in the past. I think, again, right, everyone's situation's very different, but that's something that we have had very respected BCBAs walking us through in our house personally, when addressing some of my son's needs. And I was his go-to for everything, right? And
Mhm.
we eventually started, when he wanted some of those really preferred activities, I would actually walk him over and prompt him to actually ask my husband to get that
Right,
deal for him, and
right,
eventually
right,
that it did gradually build him into more of that positive role, which was beautiful. So
right.
great. And again, the answers that Delia has to give you today are going to be really general. She doesn't know the situation as a whole. We need a lot more details to better provide some specific resources to you.
Right. And
Um,
I wanted to say one more thing that if there is a behavior specialist that works for the agency that this group home is under, to really reach out for those contacts within the agency, even if they're not specifically uh, folks that are like designated to that group home, but if that is available within the agency, to reach out and maybe ask for support, just to kind of tackle that issue as well.
Perfect. And by all means, if that group home doesn't currently have a BCBA assigned to the agency, that's definitely something that the support coordinator can be brought into to see
Absolutely.
if additional resources may be needed. So again, reach out. We'll be between CLEP. Delia will be able to give you some resources for additional support.
Right.
The next question is going to be, let's see, we have someone an individual who is being supported is telling a DSP that a supervisor has given them permission to do something, but the supervisor has not provided permission. This individual is just trying to gain access to something that they may not be allowed to have access to at that time. Do you have
Right.
any suggestions on how to approach a topic such as this?
I would probably say the pairing one again, so that the um, just loosely speaking, I'm guessing somebody might describe that as trying to take advantage of the direct support staff. So maybe going to that supervisor together with the person and saying, "Hey, I just want to double check," and kind of having the the supervisor at that moment kind of demonstrate that no, that's not the case. Kind of giving not only the kind of transferring a little bit of that support to the DSP. Um, so it goes kind of both ways. It could be for to pair as a positive, reinforcer, but it also can go back to pair as someone that's providing support and does have like a clear say in some of the responses. So you're still creating consistency through the pairing process.
Wonderful. So I think what's great about today's session is not only have you provided us with information specific to support staff, supporting someone, but I think a lot of what you taught us today also can work from staff member to staff member. And
Absolutely.
I do want to get to one question because I think that a lot of what you shared today, and sometimes it slips our minds, is that this can actually really work well a lot of times within the family home,
Oh,
also
absolutely.
with a caregiver to someone receiving supports. So our last question for this session is, someone was thank you for, amazing and realistic advice. She said, my sibling is and has been living with us during the pandemic. Our household is out of sorts due to the disagreement on how to handle behaviors, especially negative ones. I have suggested only one person provide direction, and that one person being this individual typing, but others feel the need to interject. They have greater expectations and take things personally. Any advice?
Oh, okay. That's a tough one. I would say that maybe a way to approach this is how the person you're supporting, so in this case, your sibling, responds to others versus how they respond to you. And really trying to get everybody to look at this as an objective situation rather than subjective. So the focus being on your sibling saying, you know what, let's attend to how he's responding. How does he respond to me versus how does he respond to you? And really taking the lead from that. So if he responds better to you as a sibling, and that in the way that you're interacting with this person, then you really want to demonstrate that, right? I would say data, but maybe data is not the thing to bring up at the moment because it can be volatile to bring that even extra objective measure to really look at the outcomes. But taking the lead on the how the person is responding. So if you look and say, hey, he responds really well to this way of doing things, to this method that I've been trying. Why don't we try to maintain that consistency in the outcomes? So either let me kind of intervene and help during these moments, or pair with me to learn how I do it, to learn how I'm doing things. So everybody can sort of respond in a similar way so that the outcome remains consistent with the sibling, right? So that can be something that can be helpful. And if you are getting, if you require more assistance, really talking to your support coordinator to find those behavioral supports for your sibling. Um, but I think just as a baby step kind of situation, as is really looking at how your sibling responds and taking the lead from that. If he responds better to you, really try to show that and demonstrate that to the other family members in the home and saying, you know what, let's do what works for him, what's beneficial for him. And this outcome is much better than this other outcome when you guys just kind of, say whatever. But without blaming, because again, you don't want to blame because I think that makes people more defensive, which is why I like the idea of focusing on the outcome that is being achieved for the sibling. So if he or she is doing better with one way of interacting, really putting the focus on that. I hope that helps a little bit.
Absolutely. Delia, again, thank you so much for all your sharing your expertise today, your advice, your suggestions. Greatly appreciated by it all. I do just want to, before we hang up, let everyone know that if you want to quickly go into your chat box, you can copy and paste the link to today's PowerPoint. Delia is going to leave up her contact information for another few seconds for you to also jot down. Please know that you will receive a follow-up email tomorrow. Within that follow-up email, you're going to notice that you'll have a copy of this webinar recording for attending today. You'll also have a copy of the PowerPoint. And that email will also serve as an attendance email. So for anyone who needs a certificate of attendance, please feel free to just print that out. It will recognize that you did attend this session, and we'll provide some of those details that are needed. Delia, again, thank you as always. We look forward to the next session. If you have not yet registered for the next session, please access the email that you received. We will be sending out another email within the next week for the next 2 sessions of this series. So please be well, everyone. Thank you again for joining us and have a lovely day.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Thanks, Delia. Bye-bye.
You're welcome. Bye.